All right, so Russell Brand is a famous comedian and an actor and apparently a podcaster. And I've been watching his podcast recently, and I've kind of been a big fan of them, or at least a lot of his takes, not obviously 100% of them, but he does seem to have a very anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, anti-establishment edge to him. And again, although I don't agree with all of his takes, I've kind of been a pretty big fan of some of the stuff he's been doing recently. And one of the things that he did recently was have insane far-right propagandist Candace Owens on his show, and he pretty much just naturally obliterated and destroyed her entire ideology in this video that I want to show to you guys. So I'm basically going to play this and talk about my thoughts throughout it, because this is pretty telling in terms of what Candace Owens believes in versus what is pretty intuitive to a lot of people, even like Russell Brand, who aren't necessarily like deeply involved in politics and stuff. What he's saying here makes a lot of sense to me, and let's just go ahead and watch this.
There's a link in the description. Let me know what you think about this conversation in the comments below.
Get together
I agree,
in cities
but
and towns.
do you not think this individualistic culture is in itself destroying the principles at a spiritual, human level of community? Do you not think when people see this economic inequality, this disparity, I'm not talking about hating your little rich friend Lola Bell or whoever it was, you went round to see her nanny and were infuriated by it, but thought, oh, well, maybe one day I'll have my own nanny. Do you not think that economic inequality creates in a human being a sense of injustice, of unfairness? Because people, do you know what, Candace? 90% of people that are rich, do you know why they're rich? They was born rich.
Okay, I can tell you something. I think that economic disparity creates that feeling, but a fundamental understanding in economics can help you
know
conquer
that the most people that are rich are born rich? It's not like there's a tiny minority of people that are like you that come from a poor background and manage to overcome it. And this is what's a problem I've noticed with a lot of great people, is they sort of believe that their greatness is something that can be replicated, and I don't think it can.
I see. So I believe in the individual, you don't. That's our fundamental differences.
That the primary goal of the individual should be to serve the community.
I do not believe that the primary goal of
what
an
do you
individual,
think the primary goal of the
I think that once
individual
an individual
should be?
feels
To
that
serve
they
the
have
individual.
Served, so you're discounting the human spirit.
I'm not discounting it. I'm
is.
saying that's all
Let me
there
ask you-
is.
Let me ask you a question. No, there's not.
Okay, so they're going to continue here in a second, but so far, I mean, he's just completely destroyed her entire ideology, right? I mean, he's basically just saying, what is the purpose of living in a society, in a collective civilization, if your only purpose is to serve the individual instead of the collective? Of course, I mean, this is basic, like, the underpinnings of socialist ideology is that we shouldn't just be every man for himself and trying to compete to see who can be the most dominant capitalist and extract the most surplus value from their workers as possible. And that's exactly what a lot of these billionaires have done. And he was 100% right, statistically speaking, in terms of how a vast majority of very wealthy people, millionaires and billionaires, are born into that wealth. We don't have a perfect meritocracy, as Candace Owens would like to believe that we have, or like to propagandize her listeners into believing that we have. We don't actually have a meritocracy. I mean, even if you just took some examples from the two richest people on earth right now, Jeff Bezos, did he like start from the bottom and didn't have anything and worked his way up? No, he had about a $300,000 handout from his parents to initially invest in Amazon, and then he used that to basically do what? Did he really innovate or create anything that's radically different or changed much about society and the way that it functions? No, he basically just created an online book delivery service that then he used to then take over different parts of the market and absorb and destroy small businesses while bringing everything under the consumer marketplace under his control. So he's really just a good capitalist. He's not like some crazy entrepreneurial person who decided to create some disruptive technology or innovation or inventions or anything like that. And then you take somebody like Elon Musk, who's also like the second richest person in the world right now. His dad owned a fucking emerald mine in apartheid South Africa and had real estate investments in apartheid South Africa. He wasn't somebody who was, born from the bottom and slowly worked his way up top. And on top of that, he's mostly just a marketing genius, okay? I'll give him that much credit. But he's not like the type of, industrial inventor that people like to make him out to be. In large part, he's just bought other people's inventions and then marketed them in a really effective way under a capitalist system. And all of these billionaires have made their billions by extracting surplus value from their laborers. In other words, they've made their billions by exploiting and underpaying the people who are actually providing the value for their companies. So he's 100% right in terms of that dynamic and how we don't live in a meritocracy, and a lot of these people are born into the wealth. But nonetheless, Candace Owens still staying firm to her belief that we do live in a meritocracy, and that all of these billionaires suddenly like magically woke up one day and were like, I'm just going to work really hard, unlike everyone else in the entire country, right? We only have 600 billionaires or so within this country. So you're trying to tell me that the rest of the 99.9998% of people just didn't work hard enough? That's bullshit. It's not believable. But they continue the conversation.
in a humanity. Think of animals in the wild. You don't even have to go to humanity. We can just think about animals in the wild. What is our human instinct, okay? Are you going to make sure that everyone on this block is fed before you feed yourself? Do you go around and say, hey, have you had breakfast this morning?
Listen.
Hey, have you had breakfast this morning? Hey, or you're going to make sure you're eating. And if you have an excess, of course you're going to do the human condition, and our incentives are going to be to want to help people.
Are you mental? Excess. The richest 15 people on the planet have got as much accumulative wealth as the poorest 5 billion.
But
that's an excess.
No.
That's an excess.
Okay. Excuse me. First and foremost, you're talking about literally 0.00001% of the world is what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's the point. The 0.0001% of the world control more wealth, like he just said, than the bottom billions of people. That's exactly what we're describing is the problem with the current system. And she's like, oh, well, you're just trying to target a tiny minority of people. Yeah, because they're the people who have risen to the top of the system and are hoarding the vast majority of the resources. How is that not understandable?
Okay,
Let's
but
get 'em!
and what are they preaching? What do they want? Socialism, so that nobody else has the opportunity to become what they've become. They're the ones that are pushing for
socialism.
Yes,
That's not
they
real
are.
socialism. Well,
are you kidding? George Soros doesn't want socialist policies. Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, doesn't want socialist policies.
Jeff Bezos. Jeffrey goddamn Bezos. Famous socialist, apparently. Candace Owens believes that Jeff Bezos, the richest man on planet Earth, who has made his riches from exploiting the capitalist system, and exploiting his workers who have to literally shit and piss in bottles and bags on the job in order to create surplus value for Jeff Bezos. That guy is apparently a socialist. If he was a socialist, wouldn't he do something like, I don't know, create a democratic system within Amazon? Wouldn't he not be union busting Amazon workplaces like the one in Bessemer, Alabama, that he hired actual Pinkertons to go and harass and break up? He won't even let Amazon workers have a union, and she's talking about him as if he's a socialist. It's just laughable. She either is completely disingenuous, which is really the more likely outcome, or she has no idea what any of these words actually mean.
They want to make sure that no one else has the opportunity to get to where they got.
We need to discuss our language, me and you, because
we do.
Here's what my socialism looks like. Take Jeff Bezos' wealth from him, except for a reasonable stipend for him to live on. Something like, he can have 10 million a year or something. Tax Amazon to the ground.
So the rich people pay for 85% of all of the taxes.
Because they have more than 85% of the total wealth. Okay, this is not complicated. This is the stupidest conservative talking point that I've ever heard in my entire life, and it's what they always say. They say, do you want to tax billionaires even more? They're already paying the majority of the taxes. Yeah, they're paying the majority of the taxes because they have the majority of the wealth. This is not complicated. We know for a fact that billionaires and billionaire corporations pay less proportionally in taxes than working class people do. Warren Buffett, or one of the other billionaires, I believe it was Warren Buffett, famously said, I pay less in my taxes than even like some of my secretaries do. That's the situation that we have right now. Working class people are paying more proportionately in terms of taxes than the wealthiest people in the world. Just because they pay a vast majority of the total taxes, that's because they own a vast majority of the total wealth, and yet they still roll out these stupid talking points.
I think they should pay for even more.
Do you think
that's fact? That's fact. Yes.
Don't look at me with
I'm telling
that's
you,
fact.
that's a fact.
Face.
The top 10% pay for 85% of all the taxes. When people say they're going to raise their taxes more, I'm just like, how much more? Should we just say?
Okay, so just to get specific here, she just said, and I don't even know if this is true, but just accepting her at her word, which is a dangerous thing to do, but just accepting her at her word. The top 10% pay 85% of the taxes. Okay, the top 1% control 90% of the wealth in this country. They have more wealth than the bottom 90% of the country. So that's not even proportionate under the example that she is giving. But continue, please.
They just pay for all the taxes.
I say this, that there is no, when you're about to use an example from the natural world, and then
I'm talking about
you
America,
backed
by the
off
way.
it,
I forgot
you?
that I'm in. No, I was gonna say the instinct when you're in the natural world is that you feed your family first. You're not the idea that socialism tries to create goes against
We are no longer
human.
in the natural world, are we? We're in a world of sort of accumulation and excess, and I don't think it's even working. I wonder about sort of, look, I want, because you could say, where do you draw the line? Because look at me, I've got money now, I'm not poor anymore, and I'm not going, right, I'll just take everything that's, the thing that I do agree with when I see like sort of right-wing commentators talk, like they talk about people that are in inverted commas from the left, and they go, well, why don't you put some refugees in your house? Why don't you give up your money? And the reason is because people are selfish, and in all of us there is a kind of battle between, like, some of my impulses, Candace, are I just want pleasure and fun, and I don't care about anything except myself. That's in me. That's in me, and it's strong. But I personally think I don't feel good when I live that way. There are consequences for me, and there are consequences for others. So I kind of want to live within systems that encourage collective and communal values. That instead
theft. We're talking about theft.
No, we're not talking about
demanding
theft.
that people give up their stuff is theft. But it sounds pretty when you say
Listen,
encourage, incentives. No, when the government comes and demands that I give to someone else, that's theft.
You keep trying.
Okay, so I'm going to cut it off here because they continue the conversation, but it kind of goes in a different direction. But just on this final point, okay, Candace Owens says that theft, right? Socialism is theft, apparently. When the government taxes rich people, that's apparently theft. Okay, first of all, we obviously all have to pay taxes. And again, like I just said, working class people pay disproportionate amounts of their taxes when compared to billionaires and billionaire corporations that all the time don't pay anything in taxes. But in addition to that, socialism is the democratization of the workplace, okay? This is the one area where I would kind of disagree with Russell in terms of his framing, right? He said what socialism means to him is taxing Amazon into oblivion and taxing Jeff Bezos into oblivion. That's not what I would say. I would say socialism, to me at least, in my view, is the democratization of the economy. It is the democratization of the workplace. So instead of taxing Amazon into oblivion, you would nationalize Amazon and then allow workers to buy in and control and operate the workplace in a democratic function. That's what actual socialism would be. It would be transitioning Amazon to a worker co-op or something along those lines. That's what socialism actually is. And so when she says that socialism is theft, socialism is not theft. Socialism is literally directly empowering workers to have the actual value that they are producing for the companies. Capitalism, the system that she supports, is actual theft, okay? Capitalism is a system where a tiny minority of people get to own and control and make all of the decisions for the company, and they sit at the top and they extract surplus value from their workers in terms of, and that's basically what we call profits, right? So as a worker, you are producing X amount of value for the company. Then the company turns around, they pay you Y amount in a wage. That Y amount is going to be less than the X amount. And the difference between those two things is surplus value and what they call profits and what they take home. So under a socialist system, labor is entitled to the value that it actually creates. Under a capitalist system, your boss is entitled to the value that you create as a worker. So that's the one thing that I would disagree in terms of his framing on this. But other than that, complete obliteration and destruction of Candace Owens' entire ideology here. Credit to Russell Brand. And I guess I suggest you guys go watch his videos because clearly based here, and I can't vouch for all of his other takes, but here was 100% all stuff that I pretty much agree with.